We bought property here in Nelson County in 2003 together with my sister-in-law, and my parents. And we split the property up and built homes next to each other, and we've raised our kids together since 2005. In about the spring of 2015, we received a first letter from Doyle Land Services, who is a land agent, telling us they were going to come to our property for a pre-condemnation survey. And if we resisted that, if we didn't sign the letter giving them permission to come on whenever they pleased, they would take us to court and enforce their right to do so. That began our process of learning about how FERC works, how the Natural Gas Act works, how these land services companies work, and about all of the abuses, both administrative and otherwise, in the system for landowners.
Well, the crazy thing we now know is that the FERC process is that from the moment they give you the impact statement, you have 21 days to expressly opt in to be an intervener. And if you don't do it through their obtuse old school website, you miss the opportunity to protect your rights in court. You've lost standing. And to me, the idea that someone can take your land, and that if you don't expressly opt in to the right to protect that in courts, then you lose all rights for all further process is just outrageous.
Once the project is approved, the company will get a certificate of necessity and convenience. And that essentially is it's a certificate that allows the company to build the project. But in order to get that certificate, FERC needs to find that the project will serve the public convenience and necessity, and also it needs to find that there's a public need for it. And the reason that that is so important, that finding is critical, is because once you get that certificate, the company can exercise eminent domain. And so that's a really important thing for people to understand. The power of eminent domain, even when exercised by a government, is extraordinary. The ability of somebody to take your property, even if it's the government, for a public use is an extraordinary right. Well, imagine that right being exercised by a private company, a gas company.
And one of the huge challenges, as I know you know, is that you have no standing in court until FERC determines whether or not they're going to grant a rehearing. And FERC issues these tolling orders. And so we were held in limbo for a year or so while they were going around and more or less coercing citizens in the community into signing easement agreements by telling them that, we're going to get your land through eminent domain anyway. So we either get it through quick take or you sign a deal with us. And the stress that puts people under is extraordinary. So most of our neighbors settled during that period while we still didn't have standing to take this case forward. FERC is mandated to give a response to a request for rehearing within 30 days.
Right.
And that's supposed to be a yay or nay vote. But of course, they have too much on their plates, and there's a lot of complexity and uncertainty, and so they have adopted a practice of approving the motion for rehearing, at least for consideration, for further consideration, which is sort of puts you in this limbo where they've not officially decided, no, you can't have a rehearing, at which point you're allowed to go to the courts. You literally can't move your case forward until around whether or not this whole project is valid in any legal remedies until FERC makes that decision, because you're sort of kicked out of the courts until then. And so during that time, remember, they have conditional permits, they have the power of eminent domain, and they have the court's extension of quick take. So while you're waiting and have no remedy, they are literally threatening people, taking land, digging trenches, cutting trees, and proceeding, so that by the time you get a resolution one way or another, you're arguing over a project that is often in the ground. The net effect of that is that the only thing a landowner gets to argue, if you don't sign an easement, by the time you get to court, all that's left is the dollar amount, because the details about where they sited the pipeline, whether or not you moved it off your prime pasture land or against the edge of your property, or didn't take out the tree where your great grandma was buried or whatever, all of that stuff is now moot because they've already put the thing in the ground. Landowners, if they care about anything other than just price, have to go to the negotiating table. And to call it a negotiating table is a bit absurd, because one party has everything to lose and the other party has literally nothing to lose. If they don't settle with you, they will go get possession of your property through the courts and do what they want anyway. And so it's a wildly imbalanced.
We went to court in February 7th of 2018, and I was totally prepared to go to court and make a statement and testify. I always thought that everybody had their day in court, but the judge, in his infinite wisdom, decided only 4 people in West Virginia would get, in the Southern District of West Virginia, would get a chance to testify, and I wasn't one of them. So that was the first grievance, and my civil rights were violated that day by not allowing me to testify.
Do you think the rules are set up fairly to protect the private property rights of American citizens?
No. I mean, I think that what really happens is not just the private property rights, but the entire due process is ripped away from American citizens by all of these administrative rules, which collapse upon you to leave you in this place where there is nowhere to turn while they're cutting trees and digging trenches on people's property.
These tolling orders are insane. I think they're illegal. It's like me saying, Walmart. If Walmart had eminent domain, and they were saying, well, we're going to build a Walmart in the middle of a little town somewhere, and a regulatory agency said, well, we won't let people object to it until after you get it built, and then we'll let them object after you get it built.
The Natural Gas Act was created at a time to help facilitate gas infrastructure in rural communities. Makes a lot of sense. And FERC was established to sort of manage that process. So FERC doesn't really have a mandate to protect landowners or citizens. Their mandate is facilitate energy infrastructure.
Americans are not getting a fair shake at FERC, which is rubber stamping the requests by industry of certificates of convenience to build on other people's land. FERC has approved more than 99% of industry requests for certificates of convenience to trample other people's land in order to build pipelines. Meantime, FERC has denied every single request for a rehearing by a landowner. And not only do they deny the request for rehearing by landowners, they delay their denial by weeks and months, sometimes even years, in order to prevent the landowner from getting to court to appeal this denial. This practice of automatically issuing tolling orders is blocking people from getting due process. It's blocking people from getting justice. This is an abuse of power, an abuse of eminent domain all over America. What about the due process rights of the people? What about the property rights of the people? Here at the Oversight Committee's Subcommittee on Civil Rights and Civil Liberties, we are committed to vindicating the due process and the land rights of the people against this outrageous abuse by FERC and the natural gas companies. We will hold them accountable. We will let you know as our investigation continues. Thank you for joining us.